What if history is about to repeat itself? 4 years ago, Saudi Arabia stunned the football world by defeating Argentina in one of the greatest World Cup upsets ever seen. Now they're facing another South American giant, a two-time World Cup champion, a team packed with stars from Real Madrid, Manchester United, and the Premier League. A team many believe could make a deep run in this tournament. But here's the question nobody can ignore. Are Uruguay walking into the same trap that Argentina fell into? Because while the betting markets heavily favor Marcelo Bielsa's side, there are a few warning signs that could make this much more complicated than people expect. And if Saudi Arabia can survive the opening storm, this match could become one of the biggest stories of the group stage. Let's break it all down. Saudi Arabia begin their World Cup journey under very different circumstances compared to 4 years ago. Back in Qatar, they arrived with stability, confidence, and a manager who knew exactly how to get the best from his players. Today, things look different. After a difficult qualification campaign, Hervé Renard departed, and Georgios Donis was handed the responsibility of preparing the Green Falcons for football's biggest stage. The challenge? He's had only a short period of time to implement his ideas before facing one of the most intense teams in world football. Saudi Arabia remain heavily dependent on one man, Salem Al-Dawsari, the hero who scored that unforgettable goal against Argentina. At 35 years old, he's still the team's biggest attacking weapon. His ability to drift inside from the left flank and create moments of magic remains Saudi Arabia's greatest hope. But the concern is goals. During qualification, Saudi Arabia struggled to consistently create chances and score. Against elite opposition, opportunities are often limited. And against Uruguay, every chance could be precious. Meanwhile, Uruguay arrive with entirely different expectations. This is a nation that expects success. A nation built on football history, a nation carrying the famous spirit known as Garra Charrua. Under Marcelo Bielsa, Uruguay have transformed into one of the most aggressive pressing teams in international football. The old generation has moved on. Luis Suarez is gone. Edinson Cavani is gone. This is a new Uruguay, a younger Uruguay, a team led by Federico Valverde. The Real Madrid midfielder has become the face of this generation. His energy, leadership, and ability to influence every phase of play make him arguably the most important player on the pitch. Uruguay enter this match unbeaten in their last 5 games. Yet there is one concern: goals. Despite controlling matches, Uruguay have sometimes struggled to turn dominance into comfortable victories. That issue could become important against a Saudi side, likely to defend with almost every player behind the ball. And that's where this story becomes fascinating, because one team wants chaos, the other wants control, one wants possession, the other wants patience, one wants to attack, the other wants to survive. And those opposing philosophies could decide everything. If you're looking for where this game will truly be won or lost, don't watch the strikers. Watch the midfield. Because this is where Uruguay hold a massive advantage. Federico Valverde, Manuel Ugarte, Rodrigo Bentancur. That's one of the strongest midfield trios at the entire World Cup. Valverde brings world-class athleticism, Bentancur brings control and progression, Ugarte brings aggression and defensive security. Together, they give Uruguay the ability to dominate territory for long stretches. Bielsa's system depends on this trio suffocating opponents. The moment Uruguay lose possession, they hunt the ball aggressively. The objective is simple: win it back immediately. Never allow the opponent time to breathe. Never allow them to settle. For Saudi Arabia, surviving that pressure becomes the first mission. Expect Georgios Donis to prioritize defensive compactness. Saudi Arabia may begin in a 4-2-3-1 shape. But without the ball, don't be surprised if it resembles a 5-4-1. The lines will stay narrow. The spaces between defenders and midfielders will be extremely small. The goal is to force Uruguay wide. If Valverde and Bentancur can play through the center, Saudi Arabia will be in trouble. So expect Saudi players to block passing lanes and force crosses into the box. And that's where Uruguay face an interesting challenge. Their injured defenders may actually affect their attacking rhythm too. Without some of their usual options, Bielsa may ask his fullbacks to push even higher. That creates opportunities, but it also creates risks, because every time Uruguay commit numbers forward, space appears behind them. And there is one player Saudi Arabia will target immediately: Salem Al-Dawsari. If Saudi Arabia win the ball, expect them to find him as quickly as possible. One successful counterattack could completely change the momentum of the game. But can Saudi Arabia absorb wave after wave of pressure for 90 minutes? That's the question. And the answer may determine whether this becomes an upset or a routine Uruguay victory. Let's start with the man carrying Uruguay's hopes, Federico Valverde. This tournament feels like a defining moment in his career. For years, Uruguay relied on Suarez and Cavani. Now the responsibility belongs to Valverde. He controls tempo, he creates transitions, he wins duels, and perhaps most importantly, he can score goals from absolutely anywhere. Against a deep defensive block, moments of individual brilliance often decide matches. Valverde possesses exactly that quality. Then there's Darwin Núñez, perhaps the most debated player in the entire squad. Nobody questions his movement. Nobody questions his physical attributes. Nobody questions his work rate. But finishing remains the big question mark. Uruguay will create chances. The issue is whether Nunez can convert them. Because in games like this, missing opportunities can become dangerous. The longer Saudi Arabia stay alive, the more belief they gain. And that's exactly what Uruguay want to avoid. For Saudi Arabia, everything begins with Salem Al-Dawsari. He's the emotional leader, the technical leader, and the player most capable of producing something unexpected. If Saudi Arabia are to shock the world again, there's a very strong chance Al-Dawsari will be involved. Keep an eye on Saud Abdulhamid as well. As one of the few Saudi players with European football experience, his pace and athleticism could become crucial during transitions. His battle on the right flank may be one of the most important individual duels of the match. But here's where things become really interesting. Can Uruguay's injury problems be exposed? Ronald Araujo is likely unavailable. Jose Maria Giménez remains doubtful. Georgian de Arrascaeta is absent. Those aren't minor players. Those are pillars of the team. Uruguay remain favorites, but they're not arriving at full strength, and Saudi Arabia know it. Another question. How will Miami's conditions affect the game? The forecast suggests high temperatures and possible thunderstorms. That matters. Bielsa's football is physically demanding, very demanding. His players press relentlessly. They run constantly. In difficult weather conditions, maintaining that intensity becomes harder. If the match slows down physically, Saudi Arabia may find opportunities to stay competitive longer than expected. And then there's the psychological battle. Saudi Arabia have already shocked Argentina. That memory still exists. The belief still exists. Every underdog dreams of repeating history. Every favorite fears becoming the next victim. The longer the score remains level, the louder those memories become. That's what makes this matchup so dangerous. Not because Saudi Arabia are stronger on paper, but because football doesn't happen on paper. It happens under pressure, it happens in moments. It happens when belief starts growing. Let's look at the three most likely outcomes. Best case scenario for Saudi Arabia. They frustrate Uruguay early. The defensive block remains organized. Al-Dawsari finds space on the counter. The crowd begins sensing another upset. Suddenly pressure shifts onto Uruguay. This becomes a tense, emotional battle decided by fine margins. Likely score 1-1 or a shock 1-0 Saudi Arabia. Best case scenario for Uruguay. Valverde dominates midfield from the opening whistle. Saudi Arabia struggle to escape their own half. An early goal forces the Green Falcons to open up. Once spaces appear, Uruguay's superior quality takes over. Likely score 2-0 or 3-0 Uruguay. Most likely scenario, somewhere in the middle. Saudi Arabia defend bravely, Uruguay control possession. The game remains competitive for long periods, but eventually the midfield quality of Valverde, Ugarte, and Bentancur begins to wear Saudi Arabia down. One breakthrough arrives, then another. Not spectacular, not dramatic, just efficient, professional, and enough to secure 3 points. Predicted score, Saudi Arabia 0, Uruguay 2. So, can Saudi Arabia shock another football giant? The possibility exists. That's the beauty of the World Cup. Nobody gave them a chance against Argentina either. But unlike Argentina in 2022, Uruguay know exactly what happened. They've seen the warning signs. They understand the danger. And under Marcelo Bielsa, this feels like a team unlikely to underestimate anybody. Still, football has a habit of creating surprises when we least expect them. Will Federico Valverde take control and launch Uruguay's World Cup campaign in style? Will Darwin Núñez silence his critics? Or will Salem Al-Dawsari deliver another unforgettable chapter in Saudi Arabian football history? In just 90 minutes, we'll have our answer. And whatever happens, the result could shape the entire future of Group H.